River City Girls Zero released on February the 14th for the Nintendo Switch. And for those that may not be aware, I am the lead developer on the project. And this is the second game to feature the Carbon engine that I developed for limited run games back in 2020. The first being Shantae, which released in 2021. And in today's episode, I wanted to talk about River City Girls Zero, the port, and what went into it. River City Girls Zero is an updated edition of the original Super Famicom title Shin Nekketsu Kouha Kunio Tachi no Banka, and it's the first title in the Kunio-kun franchise to feature Kyoku and Masaku in action. Now technically, this isn't a River City Girls game, but it does feature the girls as playable characters in the game, and so I would consider it more of an origin story. The original game was released in 1994 exclusively for the Super Famicom by Technos Japan, but it was developed by a team known as Yamane, which were made up of former employees of Technos that had an impressive list of credits to their name, including Double Dragon in the arcades. If you are familiar with the gameplay style of Double Dragon, then River City Girls Zero will feel quite familiar to you. The original Super Famicom release retains that Double Dragon feel. Timing and movement is extremely important, and the game can feel quite stiff, especially if you compare it to modern brawlers. And this updated River City Girls Zero is the same game, but localized translations exist for English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, and the original Japanese version is available as well for all fans to enjoy. And this is the first time outside of Japan that many have been able to play this game outside of a fan-translated ROM hack. So, bringing an original Super Famicom game forward only can mean one thing, assuming we have no source code, which we don't. That means we need to use emulation, and this is where I come into the project. In 2021, Limited Run Games released Shantae for the Nintendo Switch, and I developed a custom emulation engine known as Carbon to run that game. And since then, we've formed a Carbon development team at LRG to facilitate more Carbon engine releases. Now, the first Carbon release, Shantae, was very well praised, and I was quite happy with it, but looking back, it's a little bare bones. The gameplay experience was one-to-one of the original Game Boy Color, and I was very happy with the way it turned out, but the presentation could have used more work. Now, for River City Girls Zero, we really wanted to step up the presentation aspect of the game and kind of make it feel like it is just a regular game, like a port of a game to the Switch, rather than an emulated version of a game, if you will. So for River City Girls Zero, we made a point very early on in the project that we would considerably enhance the presentation layer, providing options to have custom intro and outro videos play, customized music and background themes, and also have some really neat touches in the art section, including the ability to use 3D models. So in River City Girls Zero, I built a 3D model viewer that simply would load 3D models of pretty much anything. And for this release, we incorporated the cartridge as well as the box from the original Super Famicom games, and I think these turned out rather well. The user interface and experience also received a major update. Rather than the more traditional retro collection, for example the Nintendo Switch Online service, where you select the game and then once you're in the game either load a save state or create a save state, for River City Girls Zero we wanted the flow to be more in the style of a regular game. So when you start the game and select the language, you will note there are 3 save game slots that exist, and these are simply save states or a snapshot of the game progress, but are presented in more of a traditional style as to not confuse the player. We got some reports from Shantae that some users weren't really sure how to save and load their game once they selected it. Now, speaking of Shantae, development was mostly handled by myself, but for River City Girls Zero, Way Forward were very much involved in the project. In fact, I would say it was about a 50-50 split. Way Forward would be responsible for all the translations as well as the incredible manga sequences and credits for the game. And of course, the music outside the game itself was produced by Megan McDuffie, with Demon Dice featuring in the end credits roll as well. Way Forward also built the UI layouts, and this was something that we integrated into the Carbon engine for the release of the game, and it really does retain the River City Girls theme and complements RCG1 quite well. Now, the original version of the game was developed in mind for the Nintendo Switch, but other versions are currently in development for PC, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. But one of the very early goals was to make sure that Super Famicom games were running at a good level of performance on the Nintendo Switch. Now, while many people will say that emulating the Super NES on the Switch has already been done with the NSO and it should be easy, I also will say that you should never take anything for granted on the Nintendo Switch. Just because you can run emulation doesn't mean it's going to run well on the Nintendo Switch. And we did spend a lot of time properly threading the code, making sure that the PPU layer was running properly, and ensuring that we got a locked 60 FPS with audio that does not pop or hitch or glitch at all, as well as reducing input latency as much as possible. Now, I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give to anyone that's in game development is try to build the Switch version out first, if possible. I know many people that work in AAA certainly don't have that luxury, but if you don't, then try to keep the Switch version at parity at least with the kind of the mainline version. Don't kind of forget about it until the end of the project, because you're really going to put yourself into a difficult situation. Now, because the original game was released in 1994, it does require some patching to bring it in line with a modern console experience, and much of it is done on the fly in a similar way that Lua scripting works, but we don't actually use Lua scripting in our engine at all. As an example of some of these patches, you'll note that the game keeps track of the stage that you're currently on. This is visible in the file menu when you want to select the game that you want to reload. And this is not something that is anything special. By simply poking certain memory addresses, we can pull out relevant information and metadata about the game itself, such as the current level that you're on, if it's a 1 or 2 player game, and the character that you're actually playing. One of the challenges that we faced during the development was the end sequence of the Super Famicom game. Once you beat the game normally and watch the intro, the game simply goes into a dead state, where it never goes back to the main menu. It just completely stops. Now, originally, you'd either need to reset your Super Famicom or just turn it off. Now, this is something that we needed to address because in the updated RCG 0, we wanted to make sure that both the movie outro and credits were rolled once you beat the game. So essentially, what we did in this part of the game during the ending was to keep track of the level that we were currently on in the game and apply a timer to say if we are on the end sequence and the timer is 5 seconds or greater, then fade out the audio, close down the game, and then play the outro manga and roll credits. This is different from the original game, but it's important to note that nothing was modified in the game itself. Other areas that we patched in the game were less noticeable. Because the game requires you to select a 2-player game from the beginning, there is no traditional drop-in 2-player co-op. So if you're in handheld mode on the Switch, or only one controller is connected, then we skip over the 2-player options in the game, simply by moving the cursor 1 character position further down. This is all patched on the fly as well, and we don't need to perform any ROM hacking, which could get quite messy, all things considered. Now, as for the game itself, it's quite fun to play, but it's quite dated. It's also very text heavy as well, and as mentioned, the gameplay is quite stiff, especially if you're not used to brawlers like Double Dragon or Renegade. I've seen reviewers give it a score of around 6.5 to a 7 out of 10, and I think that's absolutely fair. We wanted to make sure that this was as faithful to the original as possible, but also presented it in a nice modern way and for fans of River City Girls, and the presentation and UI aspects of the game was something that we were very much focused on. Now, one thing that we did really want to make note of was a dedication to Nier. Now, Nier was a emulation developer that worked on projects such as BeastNess, Higan, as well as Ares, and they sadly passed away in 2021, and we really wanted to dedicate this release to them. And without all their hard work in the emulation community over so many years, then this release probably wouldn't have happened. So this is for Nier, and rest in peace. Now, to finish up, other ports of the game will be coming out over the spring. Carbon has been updated to be fully portable across all modern platforms. River City Girls 0 is headed to the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and PC on Steam, so keep an eye out for those versions of the game. I'm leading development on those versions as well, and there's really not much else to say right now other than they're coming along quite well. I should mention that the PC version was shown off during a recent livestream, so here is a quick look at it. Essentially, it's the exact same release, but you can connect 2 controllers via USB to your PC and play. Keyboard menu navigation is also handled, so if the Switch is not your system of choice, then perhaps the PC version or any of the other ports might be. Now, for those people wondering, there will be more Carbon Engine releases coming out this year and beyond, so follow me on Twitter and also keep an eye out on Limited Run Games' Twitter as well for any future updates. So that will do it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to put a like on it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.